Hello there, ATS 315 students. Dr. John Schrage here, and I am having one of the strangest teaching moments of my life because I am currently under the bed in the guest room. And the reason why I'm under the bed in the guest room is I wanted to show you a little bit about Linux computing in your life and where Linux computers are. And in my case, one of the places where a Linux computer is in the guest bedroom under the bed, because that's where we keep the router. The Wi-Fi router. Why do we keep it here? It's because nobody's ever in this room, and there's an outlet right here that nobody ever uses, and it's out of the way, and there's a cable jack right here for the modem. And so, I could have dragged all this stuff out, but, whatever. I didn't want to disrupt my network connection, and so I decided instead I'll broadcast from under the bed. Now, the internet connection comes into the house on an ordinary coaxial cable line, and it comes to your cable modem. Now, the job of the cable modem is not a terribly complicated thing. Here's my cable modem here. It looks like it's about 100 years old. And all the cable modem does is communicate upstream to the servers, to the routers and stuff upstream. A wire, an Ethernet cable, a Cat5 internet cable, carries that Ethernet signal to the router, a Wi-Fi router. Now, everybody hates their Wi-Fi router unless you have a big fancy one. They're hard to work with, and they're unreliable, and all that kind of good stuff. But part of the reason why they are that way is their job is really complicated, and they are really cheap. I mean, I don't know what we paid for this Wi-Fi router, but I mean, I'm cheap. It's the cheapest one Best Buy sold, or something like that. And its job is actually surprisingly complicated. The job of a Wi-Fi router is to share one connection to the outside world, or in this case actually one connection to the cable modem box, and share it among all the devices that are in your local area network. We have a lot of devices in our house. Both my wife and I have Wi-Fi enabled phones. We got a couple tablets in the house. We've got 4 computers for sure at any given time. That's before things get even stranger. We have a lot of devices on our Wi-Fi network at any given time. You might not know it, but a Wi-Fi router can only talk to one device at a time. So if you are streaming video to the tablet while my son is watching something on the Roku box on the television while I am uploading a video from my class, that's 3 different sets of connections to the internet that the router is keeping track of at any given time. And it can only communicate with one device at a time, so it's actually rotating very quickly through. It gets a few packets of information from that laptop, and then a couple packets from that Roku box, and then a couple from that tablet, and it rotates through very fast, many times a second, picking up and communicating and sending packets back and forth to the internet to all these devices that are internal to the house on the local area network. That's a surprisingly complicated job, keeping that all working right and working right in real time for a device that's cheap and you can just pick up at Best Buy. And for this thing to be cheap, they could not afford, it's a computer. They had to actually have this thing running an operating system. There's a little computer in there keeping track of all these connections and maintaining the wireless protection and all that kind of good stuff. It's a little Linux computer. Why Linux? Because it was cheap. Cisco downloaded themselves a copy and got it working on that chip. I mean, that's what Linux is good for, right? All Unixes actually are good for, is that they are easy to install on some new chip that you don't have Windows working on or Mac OS working on or whatever. And it's powerful and it's secure, and you wouldn't believe all the cool stuff you can do once you know that this is a Linux computer. For example, you can log into it. You might have had to do work on your wireless router before, or your parents' wireless router before. Mine actually has a web interface. I actually go to a particular website on my internal local area network. 192.168.1.1 is its dotted quad. And I have it login and a password, and it's a web page being run. This little guy right here, this little wireless router, he's also running Apache. Apache, the web server. And it is serving me pages that give me like a web interface for controlling things like setting the wired equivalent password and all that kind of good stuff, and all that kind of things, and monitoring. I can limit how much time different devices can be on the network and so on. All from a web interface that's running on Apache, that's running on a little web server inside of this tiny little computer that's running my wireless. All that would never ever happen if this had to run Windows, or if this had to run some other operating system that costs money. Cisco can only make this thing available for $40 or whatever I paid for it because they didn't have to pay for the operating system. They chose Linux because it was free. they could get Apache for free. And so, here's a little Linux computer in my life, and you don't even know it's there. It's just a little thing that runs. Now, there are fancier routers nowadays that run things like Android and stuff like that, where they actually have like a touch screen and stuff like that. But I'm not going to spend that kind of money for a thing that hides under the bed in the guest bedroom. All right. Well, now you've seen. I shudder to wonder how many dust bunnies are down here. All right. We're going to go on and move on to the main part of the Stephenson lecture. Welcome back. I can tell you no professor of mine ever gave a lecture from underneath the bed in the guest bedroom. And I've got lots more plans for different examples where I'm going to be showing you more examples of Linux computers in your life. Next time you're walking around Creighton, notice up in the ceiling of a lot of the classrooms where you see all those Wi-Fi routers. Every one of those is a Linux computer. I'm telling you, Linux 1. You don't see any Linux computers every day of your life. You see those Macs and you see those PCs, but Linux 1. Linux is the operating system that has taken over the world. I want to tell you a little story about something kind of related to what we saw in the reading today from that you've been doing from Stephenson. You guys know that part of my gig is with the University of Cologne in Germany. I spend lots of my summers there and with their meteorology program and so on, and every few years I spend a semester over there. And we were trying to find a way to build Creighton up in their opinion of the students at the University of Cologne, so that they would do exchanges and so on. That's a very lucrative thing for the university to do, to get those kinds of scholarships and so on, to bring students, international students over. So the university wanted to really build up this idea that they wanted to have some kind of materials to present when we went over to Cologne. So maybe posters or something we could do at like a study abroad fair and so on. And I want to show you some of the stuff that we came up with. We actually got some financial support from that. I don't know if you guys know that restaurant up there on 38th and Center, the Greek Islands. Oh man, now that we've moved away from Omaha, I totally miss the Greek Islands. They're a great restaurant. And they gave us some financial support, actually, to help make these materials to get students to come to Creighton from Cologne. And we told them all about, one of the big things to know about Nebraska is Nebraska football. You should really come to Nebraska. There's just nothing like that in at Cologne. Now, it turned out to actually be kind of hard to make these materials. That actual stylized N that is the symbol of the University of Nebraska is actually a copyright thing, and we couldn't get that. And it turned out that the red that we used to do that printing for Nebraska is, it's really hard to reproduce that color in a cost-effective way. It's actually an expensive printing technique. So we went with blue, okay? So you can kind of see here how we went with this blue color. And we went with an N that's close. I mean, what a difference does it make, right? I mean, it's not the right N, it's not the right color, but, it kind of gets the right idea across, right? And same with, that actually the term Cornhuskers is copyrighted, but the copyright has expired on what they were before they were the Cornhuskers. They used to be the University of Nebraska used to be the Bug Eaters. I don't know if you know that. And so, we could actually get use of those symbols because they're in the public domain now. Now, we really wanted to know about, there's just nothing quite like tailgate parties. If you're a kid who went to school in Cologne, Germany, you've never heard of such a thing. I mean, they don't have trucks, they don't have tailgates, they don't know what a tailgate party is. So we wanted to show them that, and then show them the big game, that's something fun to go to and so on. And, honestly, we went one time with it showing them football, but it just didn't work. And you know what the word football means in German? It means soccer. So, okay, we kind of, you can see soccer in Nebraska. I mean, that's not impossible. So we made the soccer stuff. Now, we wanted them to learn about, the foods that we eat in Nebraska. And, this is where the folks at the Greek Islands kind of stepped in and said, they eat Greek food in Germany and we eat Greek food in Nebraska. Why don't you tell them about the great Greek food that we have in Nebraska? I mean, look, they sent us these lovely pictures of their spanakopita and their souvlaki, and, those are great pictures, and I love to eat there. So, sure, okay, we'll show them that kind of good stuff. Another thing that is actually a real thing about Nebraska is runza. I mean, they don't really have anything like that outside of America, but, outside of Nebraska. But they're actually really hard, to explain to somebody who's never actually seen it. But weirdly, actually something they do have in Germany is Hot Pockets. And Hot Pockets are kind of the same thing as a runza, and so we told them about Hot Pockets. I mean, you can eat Hot Pockets in Nebraska. So, alright, we're great. They understand what's going on, and I don't have to explain it, and okay, hey, look, a food that you're going to experience in Nebraska. Isn't that great? Another thing we told them all about is your Old West heritage that we have in Nebraska. You know, we're really, if you're in Europe, you think America is pretty much either New York or streets lined with palm trees in Miami or something like that. But they know about cowboys and stuff like that. And a lot of that stuff happened in Nebraska. And so, you know, we got some neat imagery from a stock photo place of, you know, Wild West heritage and stuff like that to help them know that there's things they could see in Nebraska from that era. Okay, great. I hope you know I'm kidding you, right? None of this is right. Of course we didn't really do this. I'm illustrating the point that your book was making about how by having to make choices about information, I got to make the choices. I got to be the one who is deciding what these kids who went to this hypothetical job fair or career study abroad fair in Germany got to see. But the information isn't necessarily all that good. I mean, it can be obsolete, right? Like, for example, that information I gave them about, you know, the Nebraska bug eaters instead of the Cornhuskers, it can be biased. I mean, I like Greek food, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's typical in any sort of way. It could be commercially driven. For example, we got money from the Greek, you know, in the story, we got money from Greek islands, so we kind of told the story that that was an important thing, even though it really wasn't. It can be the information I can give them is screened for price, like it was cheaper to print it this way than that way, or accessibility. They didn't really understand football, but they understood soccer, so let's tell them about that. There were 100 little decisions I made, and I got to make. I was the person immersed in what it meant to be Nebraska. Anybody in Cologne could do that too. But that's hard. I mean, that would take a lot of work. It would take a fair amount of work for a kid who's thinking about studying abroad to know a thing or two about Nebraska. It would just be hard to figure that out. They can go to my little display. I mean, again, we're just making a story here. But it isn't really the same thing, right? I mean, they're just getting a very superficial, they're looking at these pictures and kind of awash in the imagery. They're getting a sensorial interface here. They are using their senses, but they're not really using words. I'm not telling them, look, read this book about Nebraska, or whatever. Use of words? No, not that much. This was just senses. I got to be the one who picked what they saw, and therefore I'm kind of forming their opinion. There's lots of ways in which that stuff was wrong. Those cowboy scenes, I mean, they were like saguaro cactuses in the background. We don't have that in Nebraska. Those stupid hot pockets and stuff. I mean, there were a million ways in which I kind of had taken shortcuts and, you know, screened the information in all kinds of ways to create this sensorial interface that a hypothetical student in Cologne could see. I mean, these kind of sensorial interfaces provide an easy way to get information, but it's kind of limited information. Your book's analogy about Disney World is perfect. About how we went to Disney World and there was this very elaborate recreation of like Hindu temples and, you know, the Maharaja's journey or some such thing, and how somebody went to India and learned about these things and learned about you know, to make the bricks of the place look right, and to make the vines that were growing up the sides of it look right, and to make the imagery on the frescoes on the wall look right. And it all provides a nice sensorial interface. When you go to such a thing, you feel like you're learning something about India, and it's kind of nice, and they maybe even have a nice chicken curry for you to eat. I don't have any idea if they really eat chicken curry in India. But you know, that's kind of how Windows works too, right? When you get on your Windows computer or your Mac, you're many layers away from what your computer's actually doing. You are going to be learning over the course of the semester that all kinds of stuff is going on behind the scenes in your computer that you're not even aware of as to how it's working and what choices they're being made, and you're just up there choosing the colors and the font size on your windows, and none of that, that's just a display, that's just the front, that's the sensorial interface. That doesn't have anything to do with how it's actually working. Let me tell you a little story that is hard to believe it's true. Many years ago, like 25 years ago now, Dr. Schragi worked at McDonald's. I actually worked at McDonald's for a lot of time when I was in college. It was actually a fun job because, well, A, I never like cleaned bathrooms or fried anything or anything. I was just the guy on the drive-thru. And B, everybody else there was my friend, and they were all college students too, and it was kind of fun. One of the summers that I worked there, McDonald's had Oriental chicken nuggets. Now, this is a good example of a sensorial interface. McDonald's was all in on the whole China thing for whatever reason that summer. And, like, we had, horrifyingly, in retrospect, what a bizarre, it's so racist or whatever, you know, those kind of flat
triangle cone-shaped hats that, you know, like a sensei would wear, you know, and the restaurant was decorated with like paper dragons and things like that. I don't even remember why the whole China thing, but whatever. It was a China thing. It was like summer of '89 or something like that. Anyway, one of the things they provided was chicken McNuggets. They were the Oriental chicken McNuggets. And they came in a little cardboard box, exactly like chicken nuggets do now, but it was designed to look like a little lacquered black box, like some kind of jade treasure would be in, right? You know, like a jade dragon or something. And it had, you know, dragons on the side and realistic looking, you know, designs around the edge of it and so on. But it was just the same cardboard box they always use for the chicken nuggets. And you know what made it Oriental chicken nuggets? They served it with chopsticks, yes, chopsticks at McDonald's for nuggets, and sweet and sour sauce. Should we point out they have sweet and sour sauce all the time at McDonald's, right? Okay, well, what have we learned about Chinese cuisine? And I distinctly remember, I was working at the checkout, and somebody ordered nuggets, and you could actually choose regular chicken nuggets or Oriental chicken nuggets. The only difference was the box or the chopsticks. And I distinctly remember asking the person, would you like the Oriental chicken nuggets or the regular? And the person said, and I quote, "I don't like Chinese food." It's just chicken nuggets in a different box. I mean, it was the same exact thing. But see how the McDonald's, I mean, somebody went to a lot of work. I have no doubt that somebody in graphic design at McDonald's designed this box and, you know, looked through catalogs and found the right, you know, antique box to base it on and so on. Somebody went to a lot of work to design this. And I'm sure that, like, the little stupid hats they had us wearing were surprisingly interesting, you know, but somebody had to make all those choices just to give this vague sense that it looked a little bit Asian at McDonald's for whatever strange reason. Let me tell you another story about a place where they kind of get over this kind of sensorial interface hiding the real meaning. This is Kokopelli. Kokopelli is a trickster god out in Arizona, you know, in ancient Native American cultures. He was a trickster god. You can now find him, you know, he's not a good guy. I'll tell you here now, that ain't a flute he's got there. And, but nowadays, I mean, you can find them, you know, on flower pots and t-shirts and stuff like that. Kokopelli, the trickster god, his sanctuary or whatever in mythology was at Sedona. Perhaps you've heard of Sedona. It's one of the beautiful rock formation places in Arizona near the Grand Canyon. It's a beautiful place. And nobody goes to Sedona to see the beautiful rock formations and learn about the geography and to learn about the geology or even to learn about the interesting mythology of the place. They go because of the stupid Sedona vortex. Feel free to learn about the Sedona vortex sometime, but it is some crazy idea that, like, there's sort of this, like, alien abduction / Wiccan / crystals healing thing that goes on at Sedona. And people go there, and they go to Sedona, and they get to experience the vortex. Okay, and, you know, you wear your hemp necklace and you buy your crystals, and I'm embarrassed to admit we took a vacation to Sedona a couple of years back. And all of it is kind of easy. You go into any shop and they'll tell you all about how these crystals are going to align your chakras, or they're going to, help your back. And none of it involves knowing any damn thing. Never mind the fact that you're in this absolutely beautiful place with these unusual geologic formations and so on. Yeah, nobody cares. It's all just this silly little interface that has been set up for you, where you are just sort of experiencing what somebody has decided was important about Sedona. In their case, to increase tourism. I mean, there's lots of rock formations out by the Grand Canyon. Why are you going to choose Sedona? Because of the stupid marketing of the Sedona vortex and how, like, aliens brought crystals or some such dumb thing. It's horrible and embarrassing to go there. Okay? Why? Why do we rely on these interfaces? Why did I go into the crystal store? Why did I go into the store that had all the hemp necklaces or whatever the heck? Why do we do any of these interface things? Why did we buy chicken nuggets in a blacker plastic box? Why do we do any of those things? It's because understanding and making your own decisions is hard. If I wanted to go and learn about the geology of of the Sedona area, I'd have to get books. I'd probably have to take a class on geology. It's hard. Okay? If I wanted to know something meaningful about Asian cuisine, I'd probably have to do some learning about it. Okay? You know what? you know what something I do like? I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Asian cuisine too, but you know what something else I like? I like chicken nuggets dipped in sweet and sour sauce. Okay? Making our own, going down and going to Disney World and getting a warm, fuzzy feeling about South Asian culture because you went to Maharaja's Journey or whatever that exhibit is called, that's not a bad thing. It's just an easy thing. Okay? To learn really about Hindu culture just takes too much time. There's just too much information out there. This isn't a judgmental thing or anything that Stephenson kind of makes it sound like a judgmental thing, but honestly, we all have to make decisions about what we're going to take the time to learn about. I love what he talks about about the Time Machine movie. If you don't know that story, you got to watch it sometime. It's a classic story, H.G. Wells. The movie version, not the one that came out, like in the last 10 years or something, but the classic version is just brilliant. If you don't know about it, there are these very sweet, innocent people who live in the future, 800,000 years in the future from now, and they survive because deep below, in the caves below them, the Morlocks do all the work. They produce the power, they raise the food, all that kind of good stuff. What they don't know is that the Morlocks are eating the Eloi. The Morlocks see the Eloi as like cattle, and they eat them. It's a great story. And Stephenson says, no, you've got it all wrong. The Morlocks were the smart ones. The Morlocks were the ones who knew how to run and make food. They knew how to run all the power. They knew how to do all that kind of stuff. The Eloi were enjoying the things that the Morlocks made for them, but that's not the same thing as being the one who got to decide. I mean, the person who decided how to make Oriental Summer or whatever at McDonald's and made all those choices about the fonts and the colors and what would be offensive and what wasn't offensive and so on, had a lot of power as to how this all was going to work and what, I mean, frankly, a lot of people probably did get their impression about, like, Chinese stuff from that stupid Oriental chicken nuggets thing, okay? A lot of people do get their ideas about things, I mean, from Disney World. Look, okay, we got a picture up there where they're by Cinderella's Castle. Cinderella's Castle is a real castle in Germany. It's Neuschwanstein. Mad Ludwig I's castle in Bavaria. He never lived a day of his life there, but built this ridiculously beautiful castle up there. Cinderella's Castle is just a reproduction of Mad Ludwig's Neuschwanstein. Learning a thing or two about Neuschwanstein is way harder than just going and gawking at Cinderella's Castle. And Cinderella's Castle's nice. I'm not in any way in judgment of the people who that's what they want to know about such things. Okay? See that guy down there in the corner? He's making decisions. He is deciding things like what the web interface is going to look like, what kind of stuff is going to be in the magazine, what's going to be in the book. I don't know what he's doing, but he's the Morlock. He's the guy there with a bunch of snacks and a bunch of empty cans of Mountain Dew making the decisions as to how stuff is going to work. Okay? If he chooses different stuff to show you at the Maharaja's Journey display, you're going to see different stuff and have a different impression of Indian culture. You're going to have a different idea. They could have chosen a different castle in Germany than Neuschwanstein, okay? You have a very specific impression of castles in Germany because of Cinderella's Castle, which has nothing to do with Neuschwanstein, okay? The guy who designed it could have chosen any of 100 other castles. He chose that one, okay? That guy down there with the garbage around him, and man, that looks like my office. He's got Mountain Dew and coffee and so on. He gets to make the decisions. He's the one who has got the power. He gets to decide what people know, what people believe, and what people understand. And we are all both Morlocks and Eloi. There are 1,000 things that I think are cool that all I really know about is what I saw about them on TV or what I saw at a display at a museum or something like that, okay? I love the word wikidiots. I'm an idiot about a million things because I learned about it on Wikipedia, okay? I'm a wikidiot. All right, that's kind of a similar sort of idea. Well, there are Morlocks in any discipline. There are Elois in any discipline. Morlocks are the people who make the decisions. You can decide who you think a meteorology Morlock is. Who are the people? In fact, that's kind of what we do in the discussion 4. You can also decide who's a meteorological Eloi. Who's the person who is not making decisions but is consuming the information? And how is how do the choices that a Morlock makes influence what the Eloi knows? But we are all Morlocks and Eloi in various different ways. What does this have to do about computers and using Linux and so on? Well, we all have to make choices about what we're going to bother to learn deeply versus what we're going to say, just hand me something, it's easy enough, I'll use this little sensory interface. How about Word? Here's a screen capture from using Microsoft Word. You don't have to know anything about the production of documents to make something that looks pretty and pretty good anyway in in Microsoft Word. I was a college student about the time word processors became standard. Before then, students tended to use typewriters, and it was a thing. If you knew how to make a paper that, like if a student wrote his paper out on paper, in handwriting, and could bring it to you, and you had good typing skills, and you were good at getting the margins right, and getting the layout to look right, and it didn't look like a big mess, you could make pretty good money in college. I mean, I did a lot of that stuff my freshman year, because I didn't have a better job, and it was easy to just, students would write their papers, and then you type it up. Because they didn't know how to do such things on a typewriter. It's a pain in the butt. Word processing made that easy. Everybody can do it. You don't have to know anything about Word. I'll tell you how much you had to know nothing about Word. In some semesters in this class, we've actually had them write little responses to the different readings. And one semester, I made them we had Word installed without English as the language, like the menus were in other languages. No one had even the slightest bit of trouble with it in Portuguese or German or Russian. Okay? If they couldn't make any sense of the menus, that didn't matter. Everybody knew exactly what icon everything was. Everybody knew how to set the margins. Everybody knew. Because we are just so easy. But do you think that's how professionals do it? Do you think when a professional is putting together a book like this was written in Word? Oh, yeah. This is dynamics. Holton and Hackham, the authors, yeah, they probably wrote their original in a word processor. But do you think that when they professionally typeset this, they were using Word? Oh, hell no, it's the wrong tool for the job. Most technical publications happen to use a document-producing piece of software called LaTeX. It's for typesetting fancy technical things. Getting all the equations set up right, and all the figure numbers laid out, and the page numbers referenced, and the sections and subsections, and it automatically can generate things like the index and so on. It's way technical, though. LaTeX is not an easy piece of software to learn. You have to, be a professional in the publishing industry to learn how to use LaTeX. Another example, again, some semesters we actually use, there's another word processing program called Framemaker that is, a much more elaborate tools. But again, it's for different purposes. If I'm in the publishing industry, I want to use something like Framemaker to make my posters look good and lay out nicely and so on. I don't want to use Word. Word looks like something like a high school kid wrote his paper in. And there's nothing wrong with that. He needed a tool to write his paper. It's just a different tool than what I need to publish a book or something like that. Similarly, okay, a lot of people are familiar with Adobe products like Photoshop and Illustrator that are professional grade products for image processing. Okay? It's not that hard to learn a little bit about things like Illustrator and Photoshop, but to be good at it and to make a photo, to Photoshop an image in a way that's done well, that's hard. That's really hard. You probably have to take classes to do that kind of thing and read books and so on. To immerse yourself in it and to do it well usually takes a fair amount of effort. So in the same sort of way, then, if better tools are out there, why do we use Word? Simply because it's easy. Okay? We use tools like Word because they get things by, they do good enough, and we are not professionals at those things. When it comes to generating a document, we're Eloy. Okay? We don't work in the publishing business. We do the best we can with simple tools. They're good enough tools. But now I'm going to ask you, what does that mean for what kind of tools we should be using in something that we are more lax in, like meteorology? I mean, you're spending over $100,000 to get an education in meteorology, and you are going to be accessing tools. Do you really think weather.com is the right tool for the job? Do you think maybe you should be using some fancy technical software? Should you be using things that they use at the Weather Service? Should you be using, yeah, probably. And one of those kinds of tools is Linux. I mean, learning how to write programs, learning how to work with meteorological data sets, that's a big part of what we do. We don't want it to be good enough. You are a Morlock in meteorology. All right, we're ready to move on in Module 4? All right, please let me know if you have any questions. I can talk about that Stephenson book for hours. Okay, there is so much wisdom in there. I took out the whole thing about the first part of that reading about the technosphere. That is some very cool stuff, that temporal arbitrage stuff. That is all really, really smart about how companies release technology and so on, but we just don't have time to talk about all those things. All right, please let me know if you have any questions about these readings. This has been Dr. John Schrage.